Welcome back to the show. This is Leah Piper with Sex Reimagined, your Tantra expert. And let me tell you all, it is so sweet. We got an email today that said, very impressed with the quality of your speakers and the information. Well, thank you for letting us know that you're enjoying yourself. Tune in and hear all these amazing experts in the world of sexuality. So who do we have today, Dr. Willow?
So today we are tuning in with Alicia Davon of the Davon Method. Her and her husband Erwan work together, and they have really become the go-to expert for those seeking a higher level of relationship support. Both of them have psychology degrees and have developed a method that covers everything from sexuality to the mind to lifestyle design and how to get into and thrive throughout the stages of relationship from both a feminine perspective and a masculine perspective. And our conversation with Alicia was so enlightening as we dove deep into what it means to overcome shame, what it means to really raise your children in a shame-free environment.
Mhm.
And it was beautiful, profound.
Yeah, you'll listen in and you're going to get some good strategies on how to deflect that inner critic. And I think
Yeah.
that's such a worthwhile thing for all of us to do because that can be really harmful. And I just enjoyed who she was. We had such range we went in so many different directions, and I think you'll enjoy it. So tune in, fall in love with the beautiful
Alicia Davon.
Welcome to the Sex Reimagined Podcast, where sex is shame-free and pleasure-forward. Let's get into the show.
Hello. Alicia, so good to have you with us today. We are eager to dive into this important topic where we are reimagining what shame could be like for the future if we were able to free ourselves from some of its damage, especially around sexuality and intimacy. And also wanting to take a look at what do we want to reimagine in the world having to do with intimacy and connection and having a really juicy, meaningful, and satisfying love life. So why don't we just hop right into it with the topic of shame? What arises in your mind when you think about shame? And just the word. I'll keep it really broadened.
Yeah. The first thing I'll say is we all have it. And as human beings, it's one of the things that we avoid the most, or we work to avoid it the most. In terms of trying to make sure our bodies look a certain way or smell a certain way or our actions seem a certain way. We've learned that shame is just such an unbearable experience. We need to avoid it. It's kind of like, this is a totally different topic, which we could talk about another time, but it's kind of like jealousy in that way, where we're kind of like, no, and like, I'm not jealous. I'm not jealous. But meanwhile, we're like so jealous and we refuse to just feel it and accept that we feel jealous.
Yeah, I love that you brought jealousy up because isn't there a shame to jealousy, right?
There can be for sure. So they're definitely connected. And shame to me has a lot to do with criticism of ourselves and that really nasty negative voice that we all have inside our heads, which the inner critic is what I like to call it. We have a lot of different names for it, right? The kind of classic psychological term for it is the superego, but it's that voice inside our head that's like constantly judging us and telling us what we're doing right and wrong. And that voice has very deep psychological roots. We've internalized voices and standards and beliefs from our parents, our caregivers, our religious upbringing, if we had that, the culture. It's almost like it seeps into us. We're not born with an inner critic, but it eventually becomes one of our guiding lights as to are we right and are we wrong
Or
in
one of our
any
guiding
given moment?
shadows.
Right. Or shadows, right? It's not really the light, right? But it's the thing that we follow. It's
Right.
usually kind of sitting in our unconscious, running our lives unbeknownst to us, which I mean, definitely comes out in sexuality, which we'll get more into in detail. So yeah, and shame comes along with a lot of intense body sensations and thoughts and beliefs and feelings. It's a very intense experience, especially when we're working to avoid it because we don't want to feel it.
Yeah. So, what's an indicator for somebody who, I mean, I think we all have a sense of what shame feels like in our bodies. There's this coiling in, and we want to hide, we want to not be seen. But what's an indicator for somebody who is like to have them know that they're stuck in a shame cycle and to help them have a way to kind of like just like get one toenail out of that shame cycle. That's all it can take to like break the whole bubble.
So there's what you just mentioned. There's that wanting to coil in and hide and not be seen. There's often heat. There's a lot of heat. You think of our faces flushing red,
Yeah.
It's kind of like that feeling. I don't know why this is coming to mind, but let's say you're in a group of people and there's, you're in some kind of lecture, some kind of group, and the leader has a microphone and you raise your hand to share and they bring you the microphone and you put the microphone in front of your mouth and then it makes that screechy noise. And then you just feel like you want to die. You're just like, I suck.
Don't look at
Can
me,
I
don't look at me,
please
don't look at me.
disappear?
There's a real awkwardness, that comes with shame where you're like, oh, I don't know what to do. Like with myself or my body, I'm totally lost in space. It's almost like a bit of an out of body, even though we feel it so deeply in our bodies. Something disassociates within. There's an incongruence that happens.
Right. So it's easier said than done. But if we can really stop and feel that experience, it's funny. The reason I think that example came up in my mind is because a group that I'm part of is very much about spiritual and psychological development and presence and everything. There was a big group session and this guy, Michael, took the microphone and then that thing happened. And then he said, oh, wow, I feel really ashamed right now. And this is what it feels like in my body. And because that's the work we're doing. And it was like, oh, wow.
Yeah.
As he stopped and he felt his feet and he felt the heat rush through his body and his face get hot and his heart beat faster and that urge to coil in. I mean, he was pretty much free of it by the end of his interaction with the teacher, right? So that's my first tip, is to really stop and let yourself feel it. Now, the second tip is, see, when you start to bring awareness to this experience of shame and your inner critic attacking you, you actually start to notice what your inner critic is telling you. Like in that microphone situation, it's probably like, you look stupid. You're so bad. You're wrong. The inner critic just throws out these nasty messages. And to actually become aware of what those messages are instead of that kind of mess. It's like a mass of uncomfortable sensation and bad feeling, but you don't actually even know why.
Yeah, interesting. You don't always think to consider what's being said. Like, what are the sensations saying to you? And so then what?
Right. So then, now there's this, I love this because we actually can regain control over the inner critic. So we hear that attack and it is an attack, like idiots or whatever it is. And then if you're aware of that and you're present, you can disengage from the inner critic. That is what we train our students to do. It's what we've been taught to do. the inner critic, what you need to do is like rid it of any oxygen and push it away and disengage. Because you ever find yourself having a conversation with your inner critic? Like your inner critic's like, man, like, no, like, yeah, your body is not looking good. Like you really need to, get your belly flat or whatever. And then you say, yeah, but I had this to eat yesterday, so it's really fine. Or, okay, I'm going to go to the gym. And you're sort of in this argument with it, which
Yeah.
gives it all this power. So
Right.
a way to disengage really is like, shut up, or like, enough, or I'm not listening to you, bug off. And if you can learn, if you can get over the fact you're talking to yourself and, whatever, but it's like a
Let's normalize
forceful,
talking to
right.
yourself, people. Okay, we all.
Right.
I do it
am
all
I
the
the
time.
only one that talks to myself in my
know.
car? I don't think
no,
so.
definitely not.
I know. I'm like out on my walks having out loud conversations.
Yeah.
I'm like, well, I have my earbuds in, so maybe someone will think I'm on the phone.
On the phone. Yeah. That's a good technique, actually.
Right,
Yeah,
right,
and
right.
I think there's also some merit to like talking to your inner critic in a way of like, what is it that you need? What is it that you're really asking for? Like, I'm hearing
you
this
afraid of?
negative self-talk right now, but is there something else that is underneath that attention that you would like?
Yeah, because once we can cut off the power of the inner critic and just say like, nope, like not listening to that, meaning not taking on that harsh
Negative.
judgment.
Yeah.
And it really works if you do it a few times. You just start to feel that energy come back rather than the life being sucked out of you. Then, yeah, there's deeper feelings under there. There's kind of inner child feelings or vulnerability, or there's a need or something like that. So once you could just get that inner critic off your back,
Yeah.
then there's more experience there.
There's
That's
other
more real.
voices underneath. Yeah. That want some of your nourishment, some of your presence, some of your time, some of your attention. Usually I think when we're putting ourselves down in our own heads, it's because we're not being nourished in some place in our life. We're not, maybe it's the food we're eating, maybe it's the exercise we're not getting or whatever, but we're not self-loving. We're not self-nourishing in some way or shape.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's I think you're both right. I think also that there's a number of voices to the inner critic. So, I think it was Elizabeth Gilbert, maybe it was a podcast or something that I heard. She said something that really resonated with me. She was talking about anger and shame and guilt, and I think she was going through a divorce or maybe her second marriage. I think maybe her wife died. Anyways, she was wrestling with this emotion. And she finally just said, okay, everybody, get in the car. Get in the car. Come on, Shame. Get in the car, sweetie. Don't worry, you can take a nap. I got us covered. Go ahead, anger. It's okay, you're here. I got you. I'm with you. Go take a nap, sweetie. I'm going to drive for a while. Go rest. Come on, sadness. Get in the car. It's your turn, too. I'm not leaving without you. Go ahead and take a nap, sweet one. And I really loved sort of this mothering approach of going, we're all these things. These are parts of us. And every single one of these so-called negative emotions are there because they want us to survive. If one part can scare the shit out of you so you stay safe, it's going to say whatever it needs to say so that you don't put yourself at risk and be courageous or do something that's hard. And so I think all these approaches can be really effective. I remember during a time where I was wrestling with self-loathing to the total degree that it was so debilitating. And I had to do what you're talking about, Alicia. I had to go, I am turning the volume down on this. I won't survive with this voice in my head anymore. I've got to find another voice. And so the way that I drowned out that critic was I created another voice that was loving and benevolent and could see the future me and bring it to me now. And I just had to practice making a choice. Am I going to listen to Miss Meanie or am I going to listen to Miss Sweetie? And then trying to figure out how you can turn up or turn down those dials. So tell us a little bit more about this process. So you say, no, I'm not listening. That's
Mhm.
bullshit. We're cutting off the oxygen right now. Nip, rip, shut up.
Hmm?
I'm sort of imagining how I would do it in my head. What
Yeah.
then?
Yes. So, well, first of all, I like what you said about practicing. Like when you said, okay, who am I going to listen to? Let me practice, listen to Miss Sweetie. So, disengaging from the inner critic is a practice. So, if you say, you know, bug off, or you could use an approach like, oh, that's really helpful. Yeah. Like, yeah, you're so helpful.
Right, right.
Sarcastic,
Great,
or maybe
bad
you're assuming,
advice.
yeah, awesome. Like you're really helpful right now. Whatever it is. Some people like to,
I like
you
that.
know, look at the corner of the room and imagine someone that they're really mad at, and that's their inner critic, and they picture their head blowing up, whatever it is. You disengage. And then what comes next often is a rush of energy in, like you realize how devitalizing it was, and you just have more energy and you kind of feel
I like that.
new, right? Because I mean,
Yeah.
the inner critic is very devitalizing, and we don't even really realize it because it's just,
Yeah, and it
got
allows
us
you to
by the neck all day.
track and measure and be really present to what changes when you are purposeful about how you're handling said emotion or said critic, to be like, oh, look how fast that repairs my energy. Or
Mhm.
is it not so fast? I suppose it could be differing for everybody.
Yeah, well, you can have an inner critic attack about how you handle the inner critic. Our inner critics are
Naturally.
really sneaky, and they don't
So
want to
sneaky.
die. I mean, they don't want to die. They're
They really
there,
don't.
if we could talk about it like an entity, it's a psychic entity. It's there for our survival and to keep the status quo and to make sure that we stay safe. But it's
Right. We follow
very,
the tribal rules. We don't
yes,
die out in the wilderness. Yeah, it has
right,
right, it has its role. It's for
right.
survival. Yeah.
But it's very archaic. We don't need it anymore. Most of us know how to function well and not break laws and, all that kind of stuff. So you may notice a freeing up of your energy and an interesting new fresh feeling. You may notice another inner critic attack, and then you can disengage from that one. So it's like an ongoing practice. And there's really not much else to do after that besides notice where that leaves you, and then just, go on with your day. And of
Right.
course,
Now you realize you're hungry,
yeah.
or you gotta go pee, or it's time to get to work, or
Yes. And
Yeah,
then
I
you just
phone
disengage
rings.
again,
right,
right?
Yeah.
right.
I think you
Yeah.
have a really good point here of like how much energy can come back to you, can rush back to you.
Yeah.
Those like whack-a-mole games at the
Mhm.
fair. I like
Mhm.
to think of that when I'm crushing my inner critic. In sort of ancient culture, they call them kleshas. In Tibetan Buddhism, they call them kleshas, Kleysha. And kleshas are like mind attacks or mind fucks or this inner critic, these little gremlins. And it's like you whack one down and then two more pop up, whack those two down real quick. And they say if you squash your kleshas within the first 5 seconds, you can actually get ahead. You can actually get out of klesha attack,
Right.
But
Interesting.
if you let it go on for like 1
Yeah, if
minute,
it
2 minutes,
spirals,
5 minutes,
right.
like you're gonna have to work hard to get all those moles down at the same time.
Yes, it is. It's a practice. And what you start to realize is that it's its own psychic entity. It's a part of our identity. It's not even who we are when you
Right.
can separate yourself. Oh, there's that.
I like that point that you made too, though, that it is there to keep you safe, to keep you within tribe, right? To keep you supported and in this surviving place. However, for most of it, it's not working well. So I think that's a really important thing to sort of ask yourself once you can like squash that klesha or kill that inner critic, take the oxygen away from it. Um, then just starting to ask yourself, well, is there another way I could keep myself safe? Is there some other entity? Is there an angel? Is there a goddess? Is there a spirit animal? Is there some other entity that could come in and keep me safe in this situation where I'm feeling shut down.
It's a really beautiful idea. There is an inherent goodness of reality that we can tap into. And if there's some kind of form that represents that is meaningful to us, then that's a really beautiful thing to bring in. I mean, I'm a huge fan. I mean, the inner critic is the linchpin. It's like the core of so many relationship issues. I mean, we often joke when you're in a relationship, it's like you got you and your partner and then each other's inner critics. And there's like four people in the relationship
Yeah,
judging each
it's like
other,
it's the
being
relationship,
judged.
as my as my
Yes.
friend Charles would say.
Exactly. So it's such a big deal that whatever you can do to ward off the inner critic, bringing in guardian angels and positive forces or images, or just allowing yourself to sit in, okay, I'm not tethered to some rule book that's making me feel safe. I have some friends of ours that live in our neighborhood, and maybe in the last 2 years, they've left their like fundamentalist Christian upbringing. Their whole life was oriented around that.
Oh.
Their 3 kids were raised in that whole thing. They've got small kids, but they both were kind of like, wait a minute, there was something for them that wasn't quite aligning anymore. And they've been wrestling with that a lot because they
bet.
really had like, okay, well, here's our rule book, just abide,
Mhm.
and then we're good. And there was a lot in there for them. I'm not saying it's like this for everybody, but
Right.
that was merged with their inner critic.
That's-
And so now they're feeling kind of untethered, but they're getting used to that feeling of like, wow, okay, woo.
Now they get to find out what's really authentic and true for them.
Yes.
Well, having been raised in a Pentecostal kind of crazy church the first 10 years of my life and then got baptized into Catholicism, I'm really curious, since you brought that up, the difference of embodied shame between people who had a stricter religious upbringing as compared to people who don't. Because I definitely feel like I was spoon-fed shame. It was a part of the teaching and disciplining and controlling your children to behave was to shame them. They would shame you publicly, they would shame you privately. I mean, there were so many encounters of shame growing up. And I really do feel like it was woven into whatever the teachings were. Now, I think that those are misguided teachings. The teachings are probably beautiful. It's the delivery of the teachings that are probably flawed. And so, yeah, that's an interesting thing to possibly explore.
Do you have
the
any
differences?
Yeah, I'm curious, Alicia, do you have any personal experience with like religious shame upbringing, or was there a pinnacle point in your life where you were like, okay, let me eradicate shame? I actually remember a moment in my life where my partner at the time had said something to me, and it flowed right by me, and later on my girlfriend was like, I felt like he was shaming you when he said that. And I was like, wow, that didn't register at all inside of me. And I was like, maybe I've become immune to shame. So I actually wrote a whole thing on that, becoming
Uh-huh.
immune to shame. And I think it's possible. I think it is possible to really overcome. And I'm just curious about your own personal journey with it. Because I mean, we all have such a personal journey with shame.
Oh, we all do. And we all have it, whether it's from a strict religious upbringing, or maybe there was something about our parents that were, one of them was really critical and judgmental in general, or maybe there was, something that happened embarrassing, like in elementary school, that like just everybody's laughing at us and it just stuck with us. Or, I had, one of my, those experiences that just stick with you, like when I
Yeah.
was 6 and I was in this tap dancing class and I was there. And then at the end, like all the parents came to pick us up and they were back on the back wall watching us. And it was time to end. And the teacher said, okay, let's do the routine one more time. And I said, I don't want to do it one more time. So I was ready to go home.
Yeah.
And then my mom like walked up and grabbed me by the arm and, Alicia. And I remember just like, he felt like
I did
that.
something
Felt
wrong.
so ashamed. I did something wrong. I upset my mom. right? So then, of
Yeah.
course, that planted the seed of don't speak your mind, and you know how that goes, right? So that's
Right.
one of my stories of, wow, that's a moment where
Right.
I
That
felt
imprint.
fine saying how I felt. And then
Right.
suddenly I was like a terrible person. So
Right.
That's a great
presenting all these
example.
people. Yeah.
Yeah.
And we all have those, and they could be
Yeah.
so like a moment in time in our 5th grade classroom or
Yeah.
whatever.
They can be so
yeah.
seemingly benign,
It's-
but then they
yeah.
like, stamp out into the rest of our lives.
Yeah, my mom doesn't even rember that,
Of course she doesn't.
Yeah, and I'm
Yeah.
like, but
Yeah.
that defined my identity, Mom.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Right.
this is so interesting. So, I had a year. It was after the big sweep with Brene Brown being with her TED Talks and her research on shame and talking
Yeah.
about pursuing being shame free and how shame thrives on secrecy.
Mm.
It's this corner in our thoughts and in our mind and in our bodies that feels like a secret. We don't want to expose our shame. We don't want people to know that we have shame. We don't want anyone to know that we are basically bad. That's
Yeah.
I mean, the definition of shame is that we are wrong and bad. It's not so much that we're guilty, it is that there's something flawed in me. There is something that's broken and can't be repaired. And so I took that on for a year. I said, I'm going to work on being shame free this year. And I had a community, and it was really a refreshing community because I unplugged from having to be liked. And feeling like I wanted people to like me, or I needed to be impressive, or I needed to somehow prove myself, or I scrapped all of that. I said, if I don't make one friend in this group, I'm going to be okay. I'm going to be here for me. I'm going to let it all hang out and see what happens. And so I used it to expose shame. And I would just tell, in that whole year, anytime I felt shame, I would expose it. And I did experience a tremendous amount of relief from not keeping it inside, but going, I'm feeling shame and this is why. And I think what I received from that is an ability to greater disengage, but more so from the feeling, from the sensations. So that I was no longer taking the voice seriously. The voice comes in, but just don't take it seriously. You're just a voice. And that gave me space to be okay. And to just go, all right, yeah, you're here. I don't really believe you.
Yeah,
Time to do the laundry.
exactly. It's like a
Moving right
machine.
along. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just this operating system that's really out of date. It's not that you need to identify with that or even give it much energy.
Yeah. And, to bring it around to sexuality, since the three of us have really, explored sexuality and continue to explore it to great depths and degrees, it feels to me in my own personal exploration, and I'd love to hear both of your take on it, but it's like the more you get into like an uncomfortable, like something you've never done before, or something that you have been, you had this concept that it was bad or dirty or wrong, or that you would be a bad person if you enjoyed something like that. Um, there's overcoming just the inner critic and, the general sort of shame. And then we're taking it to this deeper layer, this root chakra, second chakra layer of how to actually glean medicine. I feel like there's medicine in shame. Once we get that initial inner critic off the top, like what's underneath that? So let's say I recently had a sexual experience, and afterwards I was like, whoa, I don't know, maybe that was too much for me. Maybe I felt that coiling in and that
Yeah, that
shame
moment of
around it.
doubt. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I feel like there's so much healing to be had of the inner critic and the shame gremlin when you start to explore your sexuality more consciously.
This is a huge topic in my work and Erwan's in my work. We have a particular topic that we teach a lot in a lot of different contexts called female sexual psychology. Shame is a huge part of female or feminine psychology, men and males too, right? But let's just focus on
Yeah.
the feminine for a minute. The way I like to describe it is that for most women or feminine people, there's a sexual self and then there's a non-sexual self, and there's a split, like disintegration between the two. Like our sexual selves, for many of us, it's like inherent and visceral, and there's hunger and desire and interest and curiosity, and we're just like ravenous for whatever experiences we're excited about. And then simultaneously, there exists this non-sexual self that's like a big inner critic, basically, that is like, no, this is not a good idea, either because we've had adverse sexual experiences and trauma. So we've learned like, oh no, like no. You don't put that energy out there. Bad things happen.
Dangerous. Yeah.
Right? Dangerous, religious upbringing. Maybe our parents were awkward about sex. Maybe as a woman, when we started hitting puberty, our dad got awkward or didn't know how to relate to us or whatever it is, bazillion things, right? But it leads to this, like at the same time, it's like what you were talking about, Willow, like you have this sexual experience and you explore something new. And then part of you is like, wait, I don't know.
Right.
I don't
There's
know.
attraction sometimes afterward, and you start to
Yes.
go, yeah. was
It's
that
almost
okay?
like the bigger the expansion too, the bigger the contraction can be, right?
Right,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, that's just the Tao. That's nature's way.
Yes.
And what a beautiful
Yes.
thing to respond to.
Yeah.
The contraction that's coming. It's like, oh, that's right.
Yeah.
This is how this works.
Mhm.
The rubber band that stretches and then it comes back into shape.
Yeah. And underneath all of that, whether it's criticism or embarrassment or shame, I mean, there's a lot of tender feelings. There's
Yeah.
little us that, just wanted to be able to be ourselves, and something bad happened, or we got these messages, or, there's so much in there when we can recognize the non-sexual self, the inner critic messages, and honor that, respect that, not just barrel ahead and be this, quote unquote, sexually liberated woman, because that looks good. Yes,
Yeah.
sexually liberation is good, but, you
Yeah,
don't
and
want
it can also
to play the part.
I've had positive experiences of my sexual liberation, and I've had some hard lessons in regards to it too. So yeah.
Yeah.
I was thinking when you were talking about, an entity, an angel, something that can help support you deflecting the inner critic. I was thinking about when I'm too hard on myself out loud, my husband will say, "Would you be nice to my friend?"
Aw.
Like that's my friend, and
That's
I
really
don't really
cute.
appreciate how you are summing her up, how you're judging her. Stop it. You be
That's
nice.
cute.
It is
That's
cute.
very
Yeah, and it
sweet.
always makes me feel like, oh, thanks. And so it's like so when he's not there, I can bring in his voice and go, wow, that was harsh.
Yeah.
Yeah. So tell me about like a book. What's a book that you love to recommend to people?
Oh, man. Well, okay. Well, I was going to say, I don't know. I haven't read a book in a while, but if we're talking the inner critic, there's the one that we recommend to everybody that we work with, and it's an incredible book. And it is called Soul Without Shame.
Soul Without Shame. That's great.
Soul
Perfect.
Without Shame. It's written by a man named Byron Brown, who is a student and then I believe now a teacher of the Diamond Approach,
Oh, yeah.
Diamond
Oh, yeah.
Heart.
I love
Yeah,
Diamond
which is
Heart. Yeah.
Big part of our lives.
Oh, okay.
And
Great.
Yeah.
Cool.
So
Yeah.
Amit is right in the Bay Area. You guys are too?
yes.
Yeah, okay.
They're in Berkeley. The center's in Berkeley. We're in
Okay.
San Francisco.
Cool.
So we've been a part of that for over 10 years. We love it.
Mm-hmm.
And the book is written by this man who is
Byron Brown.
Byron Brown.
Cool.
So Soul Without Shame. You can go to Amazon. There's lots of copies used or whatever. I
Yeah, we'll
recommend
make sure that the listeners get a link. Great.
Yeah,
Great.
absolutely.
Now when you think about like, your generation coming of age and the shame that you wrestled with, that we wrestled with, and this is like, you could be speaking to girls, boys, whatever the case may be, but when you think about the unique challenges that maybe this current generation is going to have, what kind of advice would you give parents, or would you directly give a kid?
Mhm. Well, I mean, there's so much going on for kids that are coming of age right now. So much.
Mhm.
I mean, I'm really happy. I don't know if you two read that. You must have. Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret, the book.
Mhm.
And now the movie's coming out. That was one of my favorite books
Mm.
Oh,
about.
really? I didn't know the movie was coming out. Great.
Yeah, I'm like all excited. I keep seeing it come through my Instagram, and I'm like,
Oh,
yeah,
cool.
because I reread that book a bazillion times as a girl.
Do you know the author of that?
Judy Blume.
Oh, it's Judy Bloom.
That's
Duh.
right.
Yeah, she's.
Judy Bloom.
I
That's
know.
right.
She's like,
God.
like, thank God she like helped me through my
Yes.
adolescence and many of us. Right?
Totally.
Yeah. So, but anyhow, people that are coming of age right now, they have added complexity. There's the already kind of cultural shame and developing bodies, and
Yeah.
there is more awareness rising, more books, more conversations. But then I live in the Bay Area, so everything is kind of progressive. So
Yeah.
my immediate circle, there's a lot of awareness around puberty, body parts, all this. There's gender stuff going on, which is
very unique gender stuff.
huge, which is
Mhm.
amazing. I mean,
Yeah.
all of this awareness is being built, and it can be confusing. It's people have a lot of reactivity
Mhm.
to all of the
Right, you've
new
got
gender
cancel
developments.
culture, you've got
Mhm.
negative bias. There's all this stuff that is, that wasn't happening when we were growing up.
Oh, social media.
Yeah,
Yeah.
porn is
mean-
next level. I mean,
Yeah.
there wasn't porn as readily available until 2005. So
Yeah.
Not to
just the porn
mention-
alone and its effect on brains is a whole
Yes,
thing.
that's
Yes.
huge. Not to
To,
mention all the isolation that we've just gone through over the
With
last
COVID,
3 years.
yeah. I've got nieces and nephews who were high school going through
Mhm.
COVID and had 2 years
a
of no
rough
school,
time.
it
Yeah.
That
totally.
is so hard.
Yeah.
Right. And then
Yeah.
all of the beauty standards
Right.
and social media.
Comparisons.
It's just like, I do not envy kids. We have a 6.5-year-old different, but I don't envy kids becoming teenagers right now. It's a lot to deal with. I don't envy parents that are dealing with that. So I don't have a big set of tips, but I think the big one tip would be, well, 2, presence and connection. I mean,
Yeah.
really noticing as a parent your own reactivity to these new conversations that are coming into the mix, being very conscious about how you talk to your kid about it, and having sexuality and puberty and relationships be open conversations. Like, there's moms here in the city that are starting these like teen girl and mom groups, or
Yeah.
I don't know if there's any for boys or whatever, but it'd be great if there were. But
Yeah.
open conversation rather than secrecy, which leads to shame.
Yeah.
And, presence and connection is really what I would say.
Yeah. I think when it comes
Can't
down
go
to
wrong with that.
one of the most
Right.
valuable things that anyone can learn is like staying in the moment, staying present, being right
Yeah.
there, allowing
Yeah, and
yourself to feel what's up.
Exactly. And I think I'm watching some parents, some rad parents right now parent their kids, and it's so funny, like all the other kids, like the friends of the teenage kids will go to that one parent who's the one who's
there's always that parent.
open.
Yeah, my mom was
Yeah,
that
and they'll be
parent.
like,
May I
they'll
be
be
that
like-
parent?
yes,
Yeah.
you will be, Alicia. You will be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
great. Yeah.
That's great. I love hearing that.
Yeah. I
So
think-
even if you're the one parent in the whole community who's being that way with your kids, it opens up a gateway for those kids, because their brains are still little sponges. Like the teenage brain we don't get fully developed. I think we're 21. So they're really paying attention to like, oh wow, look at the relationship that my friend has with their mom or their dad, based on the way that their parent is really communicative and open, and they can talk to their parent about anything. And if a child doesn't maybe have that with their own parent, they're still getting the example of it. So I think it's a really, one can change many in this situation. So,
I've got a client who's a family therapist. Really, he's like such a joy to work with him. And having been a child therapist, he was telling me some stories about what it was like and how he would work in that way. And he had this one mom and son, and the son was really acting out and struggling. And they would come in and like try to play a board game, and he wouldn't play by the rules. And I was like, "You gotta play by the rules. That's the rules." And he goes, "No, this is his game.
Yeah.
We're here to understand him,
Yeah.
not to give him another lesson." And then they'd go to the park, and it was like, "Okay, now let's just play. Let him just be who he is. That's what he needs from you, is to just be with him, listen to him, feel him. And you do your best to understand him, not always follow all these rules so you'll always be safe." It's
Right.
really like, what is in your heart and on your mind? And there comes a point where we just stop sharing that with our parents, either because we think they can't handle it, or they seem like they're unavailable, or they react poorly. And
Yeah.
so we find different outlets. And so I've been reflecting a little bit on that, just looking at my own childhood. And, I'm not going to be a parent. I thought, what a job. All you parents out there, bravo. And you deserve the love that comes with having kids, because that's a hard job. Blessings on everybody.
Indeed.
Woo! And it's like, geez, talk about, segueing, like parental guilt. If I had a prayer for all parents, it would be to release them from the guilt that seems innate with everyone who's got a kid. It's like, there's just this worry that I fucked something up.
Backing them
And
up.
it's like, you can't escape it. And it's
Yep.
horrible.
Yep. Oh yeah. No, it's there all the time. And it's
Yeah.
like it's prime inner critic territory, because it's kind of
Totally.
like damned if you do, damned if you don't. Like, am I being too smothering? Am I being too negligent? Am I ignoring? Am I too? Yeah.
Yeah. And which was going to bring me to like the thought, which was, I would really want the parent, and I think my parents did a pretty good job at this, treating me, not that as an adult, but treating me like I was a person, not just a kid.
Yeah.
And that helped me want to do hard things and do great, do all these things that I think built some good efficacy and self-esteem. So I was just thinking like, okay, so as a parent, you have to not be too emotional, but vulnerable enough that you show them how you manage shame. And then I just thought, oh shit, it is a racket, it's a racket.
Yes. It's nonstop.
One of the things that has come up recently in a podcast interview that Leah and I did with my cousin actually was around how we grew up sort of feeling shame about who we were based on comments that were made about our bodies, our skin, acne, like, oh, you're putting on a little bit of weight. What did my grandpa used to say to my cousin was something like, one bite of this is a pound on the thighs or something,
Yeah,
Through the lips and to the hips.
Yes,
Right.
something like that, and she said something that was so great. She's like, I don't believe we should ever comment on any child's body as they're growing up, as they're going through the change. Like it's a very intense time. The hormones are prolific and all over the place. It's a bit like turning into a butterfly, like from caterpillar to chrysalis to butterfly. It's a massive metamorphosis that they're going through, and their bodies are going to change and morph and do
It's
a whole
so awkward.
dance through it
And
all.
what would cause someone to even want to make comments like that, having probably remembered how awkward it is? I remember growing up, and it was just, there was always some creepy comment coming from one side of the family. It was like, stop
Creepy
looking at me.
comments. Yeah,
I know.
totally.
Yeah.
Well, and even trying to start early, I try to be aware of, like there's a little girl, not in my son's class, but another first grade class. And she is like heads taller than all the other kids. She's like the thinnest, it's like you look at her and you're like, oh my gosh, but that's just how she, her mom was really tall and whatever. But you see her and you want to be like, oh my God, she's so tall, or, wow, you're so tall, or, this kind of thing. Like I saw a funny TikTok video that was like, if people treated short people like tall people. You know how you see someone like
You're
so
so
tall
short.
and you're like, wow, you're so tall. What's it like up there?
Right.
But it's like, and then that's like seems okay because it's like so cool. But then there's a short person. You're like, what's it like down there? Oh, can I get a selfie? And it's like so disrespectful. And it's, so I try to not, because I see, my kids' friends and they're so cute and they have no teeth and I want to comment on everything. But I'm like,
Right.
okay, if we could start now, not to be like, you're so this,
We don't have to say everything that comes to our head out loud.
Yeah. Like, can I touch your hair? Like, no, they don't want that anymore.
No, they don't like to be touched either.
No.
So what would be like one piece of really good sound advice for parents who are raising kids who are starting to get into sexuality? Let's say they're 16, 17, sometimes 15, 14, who are, they've been dating for a while. A lot of parents are a lot more liberal these days, teaching their young sons about how to use condoms and get ready for sex. So
Like how to make out, how to be a good kisser, like actually giving them
Okay.
some moves.
Well, here's the thing. A few things about that. Personally have not gone through that yet. So I don't have personal experience, but I do have some opinions. And I also have like, what you just said, teaching him how to be a good kisser, this and that. I'm like excited for my son because of Erwan, who my husband is. He's the best lover. He's like so respectful. He's so educated. He's like hot. So I'm like, ooh, this is great. I don't know how that whole thing's going to go, but at least he'll get some good information. How to like be respectful towards women, but also be like cute and sexy. I don't know. So
to be sexually empowering.
Right.
Yes.
Like not feel, because that's the other thing is older men are totally squashed by the fear of seeming like a perpetrator. Because if you look at a woman wrong, you're suddenly being so offensive. And I just think it's, the roots of obviously respecting women and not overstepping. It's very good. But it gets taken so far. And so many men are then tentative, which women hate. So it's like, that's a whole other conversation. So I really do want kids to feel empowered. And, my thinking on it right now is it's better for the kids to hear it from us than only in the schoolyard or only the limited amount they learn at school. So I guess that would be my advice would be to find a way to bring it into their life, whether you leave a book on their bed and you say, hey, I left you this book. We can chat about it or we don't have to talk about it, but this is good stuff to know whenever.
Yeah. We had a student who came through the certification course and his son was, I think, turning 13 or 14. And he made him a little video, a little like not slides you put on a movie screen, but for the phone. And it was images of different vulvas. He said, I just wanted you to know that all vulvas are different. And I want you to be prepared that you're going to feel and sense and look at a lot of different ones.
Oh my God.
And I want to give you a feeling of what it looks like. And so A, you don't say, anything that would be hurtful. And B, so you can have some of your curiosity met without you necessarily running to porn. I know you're going to watch porn. I just want to remind you that, porn is entertainment. It's not real life. And I just want you to feel prepared as much as you can be without overexposing you. But here, and he did in a little CD. And I just thought that was a really interesting idea.
Yeah.
And I think that opens up a conversation should his son want to have those conversations. Now, my parents tried to be those kind of parents. So you can come to me and tell me anything. I was still icked out. I don't know. I just couldn't do it. So you can always have like the most empowered environment and kids still not want to talk to their parents.
Right. Which you have to honor,
Yeah. So to have somebody, I also like the idea of multiple points of view, to expose our kids to what other people have to say about sexuality, not just what we have to say about sexuality. I think it's like the Dutch or maybe Finland or something, some European country, they have this video that they give to the schools. I haven't seen anything like it. It was so cool. and about sex ed, and like they showed underwear, when you start to have discharge and you're a girl, and this is what penises look like, and it was like real. It wasn't just a anatomy shot of the genitals. It was it was so well done. I would really
Ooh,
define
maybe
that.
we can get
Yeah.
that here in
Yeah,
America.
wouldn't that be great?
Take
It was, like,
another
really
page out of
avant-garde.
that part of the world's book
Yeah.
because
Right,
they are
exactly,
doing a lot of right
exactly.
thing.
Yeah. I think nudity is another issue.
Mhm.
Because what's interesting in both Asia and Europe, not every single country, but in many of them, nudity, people seem to be more comfortable with it, even with like grandpa and the
Yeah.
3 grandkids, and one's a teenager and one's still a toddler, and they go hot tub or they go to hot springs, and it's not a thing. And I feel like it's definitely a thing here.
Mhm.
Where there comes a point, like I remember when my dad stopped hugging me quite as close,
Yeah.
during that like puberty
Yeah.
stage, and I didn't know as much as they knew
Mhm.
what was changing in me. But it was you don't quite understand it because no one really puts words to it, why you're not being held quite as close anymore.
Yeah.
And just want to know your thoughts on that.
Yeah. I mean, the way that transition goes from maybe kid or bigger kid to puberty, teenage, that's really, really important. I mean, the nudity thing, yeah, there are definitely other cultures that are much more comfortable, and that's really nice. And, we all often wonder as parents, like, well, when should we not change in front of our kid? Or when should we not have them bathe together? And the answer
Right.
always seems to be, well, watch your kid.
Yeah.
Watch and see when they start to like either say something or they seem embarrassed and then just stop.
Okay.
And, I think given the way our culture is, that might be the extent of what we can do. There's probably people that are really breaking the norms and living in, communities where everybody gets to be naked and
Right.
stuff, and kids are in a totally different world,
Right.
and
It's
that's
not an
one
issue.
thing,
Yeah.
right? So, but, for people that are in kind of more mainstream, I think just paying attention to your kid and doing what feels comfortable, not putting it on them or forcing anything on them.
Right. I
So
mean, because it's
that's,
a really real issue too. Like when you think
yeah.
about all the girlfriends
Mhm.
who have had an inappropriate sexual experience with someone who was way too old for them.
Right.
And I remember encounters with some people that feeling that flirtatious energy and wanting their attention, but they're somebody's dad, and you're the
Yeah.
babysitter.
Yeah.
There's just that you
Yeah.
can feel the
Yeah.
energy, and like one part of me loved that energy. It was like,
Yes.
like I loved it and I wanted more of it.
Yes.
And so like that's a real
Yeah.
thing because we are sexual beings and
Mhm.
there isn't a ton of control we have over what is arousing and what piques that sensation of aliveness in us when we're feeling it. And so we
Yes.
feel afraid for our children if something were to go too far because we all know people who've been really harmed sexually due to
Yes.
that inappropriate behavior. And so there's no easy answer. But I mean, so many things to weigh in. And,
Mhm.
one of the things, I know we have to wrap up, but one of the things I worry about is healing the perpetrators, healing the people who've done the harm because it's such a cycle.
Mhm.
The rehabilitation of coming back, of having second chances to be a healthy sexual person again.
Yeah.
And it's so undeveloped.
Mhm.
And yeah, so again,
Eh, It's such a big deal because whoever,
issue.
even if it's the perpetrator who's the uh, teenage boy babysitter that just has hormones and he doesn't realize, I mean, it's not like he's
Yeah.
completely oblivious, but I just think that so much responsibility has to be taken by the adults. Like, for example, if you're a man and you have a teenage daughter, and just knowing, okay, let me not alienate her, but let me not exploit, it's natural to kind of know, oh, my daughter's developing and, I feel uncomfortable and,
Right.
but you have to deal with that as an adult. Or if you're an adult and you're hiring a babysitter for your kids, just, okay, well, hormones are happening in certain aged kids and they don't really have that much control over themselves. Or somebody who might be considered a perpetrator, like there's some education that they need. And, at this young age, there's so much we can do as adults. So it really comes down to us. We have to be responsible for all of it because they don't know. I mean, little girls love to flirt and bat their eyes and look so cute. And I have a friend, one of our very best friends, and he has a daughter who's around my son's age. And like 3 years ago, when his daughter was 3, she would like take off her clothes and just twerk in the mirror and be like, Daddy, watch me, look at my watch. And he's like, I don't know what to do right now.
Right.
He's like, you look great, sweetie. You look great. Like that. You're beautiful, baby. But he's like, I'm so uncomfortable.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So many examples of that. And it's like, I want to preserve our sexual innocence, no matter what age we are. Yeah. And so it's like, how do we start having these conversations in the open so that we're not afraid to talk about them? Because there's something about these feelings that are uncomfortable that we don't give a voice to, but we still feel that person's discomfort. And then there's some sort of projection or transference that happens that we make meaning out of. And so we mind read things that may or may not be happening versus my dad just saying, hey, you're changing and I love you so much and I feel protective with you. And I'm changing too as I watch you change. Yeah. And I'm wrestling with my own feelings about it. And I just want you to know, like, I'm going to probably not hug you quite as tight, but it doesn't mean that I love you any less. I'm just sorting out how I feel about you growing up and changing and becoming a woman. It's so awkward for me, and like, then that would have created intimacy.
Oh my God.
And would have like helped me understand what was happening with me too.
Do you hear that?
And I didn't have to feel like a weird rejection,
Yeah. I mean, if you can have the self-awareness and the presence enough to get to the root of like why you are acting differently based on how your teenager is developing, then communicate about it. Alicia, I bet you have an amazing free gift you want to give us.
I definitely do. And this is my favorite gift to give because my favorite thing to do is talk to people and listen about your sex lives and your relationships and what you want in them and how we might be able to support you. And what the free gift is a love life consultation. So it is a free time for you and I to chat and really whatever it is you want to ask me about related to your relationship life or sex life. And here,
a love life conversation.
Consultation.
I know. And if you
that sounds like a
consultation,
fabulous,
and then, if you want any support, I can tell you how we can support you.
Perfect. Love it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for coming on. And we know everyone's going to love your gift. And we appreciate your time.
Yeah. Great to be with you, ladies.
Yeah, too, love. We'll see you soon.
Now, our favorite part, the dish.
So what'd you think of?
Ooh, dishery-doo. Ooh, dishery-doo.
Sounds like a didgeridoo. Do you know I know how to play the didgeridoo? I can circular breathe and everything.
Can you play it for arousal if you were to like do it over someone's genitals or heart?
Oh yeah.
I saw that once. I was like, that looks hot.
It is hot. I'll have to do it.
You know how to?
Oh yeah, of course.
Oh, I'm coming over. Wow.
Okay, we're getting distracted. We're talking about Alicia Davon in our interview with her. It was a very
There was no didgeridoos in the interview.
No. Genital vibration was not part of the conversation.
No.
However, we did talk a lot about how to deal with the inner critic, how to stop the inner critic in its tracks, how to overcome shame, and even looked at like where shame shows up in a full range of sexuality from, people who are going through their pubescence, their teenage years, all the way to us who are exploring our sexuality to the nth degree in this lifetime, and how we all stumble upon it. What'd you think of her? What'd you think of her conversation with us?
I liked it. I think it would, I could just imagine going even deeper, like over dinner,
Yeah,
and
totally.
kind of, um, what's the word?
Having that girlfriend time.
Yeah, it's kind of like tossing the ball a little bit.
Yeah.
One of the things that I would have really piqued my curiosity was more about seeing it as medicine, the thing that you brought up. I could kind of tell that she had a perspective
Mhm.
that was like maybe different from that. But I think when we can find meaning and purpose behind painful things, it can relieve us of and give us understanding and help put it all into perspective. And sometimes just a change in perspective changes the belief system.
Yeah.
So I think I'd look forward to wrapping more on that. I just wanted to know, what would have you had said about that had we had more time?
You mean the medicine inside of shame? Well, I
Yeah, or
always
inside the
find
inner critic, because
yeah.
one thing I was hungry for that I didn't get, which I want to get it now,
Get it.
is give it to me, Willow, is that inquiry,
Yeah.
your process for
Yeah.
finding out what's underneath that.
Yeah, well, I use somato-emotional release work, which, I originally learned through Upledger, through the Cranial Sacral Foundation. And it has morphed and changed into sort of my own thing over the years. But I always start by like, where do you feel shame in your body? And oftentimes it's like here in the chest. And what does it cause your body to do? It causes my shoulders to round. It causes my breath to constrict. It
Mm-hmm.
causes my heart rate to constrict. And I feel like I want to hide,
Mm-hmm.
And okay, so we've got this shame ball that's this tight thing in the chest, and now we've identified where it's at, and we can start to massage it apart. We can start to pull it apart. Okay, so let's go into the sensation. Do you see anything? Some people are very visual, so I'll ask them, what do you see? It's like, oh, I see this dark thing, or some people don't see anything at all. That's fine too. And then we'll start to take pieces of it, and let's say they see a dark ball, and it's like, well, what is that dark ball? What does that dark ball want you to know? What's
Okay,
it
so you're really
wanting to
going for the
tell you?
subconscious, having them really get present with what they
Yeah.
see, what they
Yeah.
feel, what they sense, where
Yeah.
is the energy.
Yeah.
Okay, I love this. Keep going.
And then they might say like, okay, this shame ball has been wanting me to know that that I'm bad, that I'm wrong, that the way
Mhm.
that I've acted is not okay, and the way
I
that
made a
I
giant
am is
mistake.
not
Yeah.
okay. And it's like, okay, now we're getting somewhere. And then I'll ask them something like, is that true? Is that really
Mhm.
true? And we'll start to question the belief system. And, 5, 10, 15 minutes into this somato emotional release, I'll ask again. Anytime I get stuck or I don't know what to say next, I'll always ask, what's the sensation in your chest right now?
Brilliant.
And they will say, or if it just comes to that point in the conversation where it's like so much has cleared, I'll ask, what's the sensation in your chest right now? And they'll say, oh, it feels lighter, feels
Yeah,
more
I feel
open.
freer.
My
Yeah.
breath is more open and spacious. My heart
Mhm.
rate feels better. Like everything has shifted. So it's amazing how emotions like shame or grief or loss or regret or
Yeah.
these sort of downward spiraling emotions that we feel have such a strong effect on our physical soma, our physical cellular bodies. And I think I think that's one of the practices that Alicia was really talking to as well. Is like, we can get into a practice where we just don't even go into those downward spirals to begin with. But it takes some time to learn how to get out of them before you can stop going down
Yeah.
into them.
To experiment enough to make the
Yeah.
choice to go, this really sucks and I got to do something about it.
Yeah.
And then finding out what ends up working for you, because I think that there's lots of strategies and it's just about, playing enough to find the thing that's going to work.
Yeah.
And I've tried a ton of strategies and I have to say, most of them work.
Yeah.
Like there's a lot of good stuff out there. There's a lot of things
Yeah.
that can move against
Yeah.
the debilitating cycle of those inner thoughts that can just be cruel. It's so interesting. I
Yeah.
also thought it was interesting, just like, I think I realized for the first time as we do this series on shame that there's not going to be a lot of answers, right? It's so interesting. I don't know when I was thinking about reimagining shame, right? Like this whole theme. And it really dawned on me like, wow, this may give us a lot of answers. My hope is that it normalizes something, that there's something there are things that we're all afraid of. There are things that we never want to see happen to anybody. And in the middle of all that, there's all this innocence running around, right? Like, yeah. So my heart feels, well, some of it feels risky too, I'll be honest with you.
Yeah.
Because in some ways we get a chance to explore like what we think is okay or what we think might be okay. And then I keep on getting this voice that goes, oh my God, there's going to be someone who responds with outrage, right? So like with everything that gets kind of put on the table, I have an inner critic that is like a part of the gallery that represents outrage and wants to, come burn me at the stake from my old witch days.
Yeah.
I don't know. I just noticed that there's it's not stopping me from anything. In fact, I'm looking forward to even moving towards that and allowing outrage to be a teacher if it appears.
If it appears.
And just really wanting to support this whole process as we do more work on shame on the show is just to go, wow, is it deep? It's a big one. And I think it's something we all have to live with. It's just how do we want to live with it? And at what point, because even when I said like, well, there's got to be a purpose to shame. Maybe we don't want to eradicate all of shame. If somebody really hurt somebody, I mean, shouldn't someone who murders someone have some shame about they just took somebody's mom or they just killed somebody's son or daughter? I mean, do we really want to unburden shame from everybody? I think I would like to see everyone be unburdened from shame, even people who do horrible things after they've felt it for a while. I don't know. See, it's so tricky trying to like narrow down an opinion.
Yeah.
So everyone, I'm not narrowing down opinions. I'm just exploring myself.
This is an exploration. Yes. We're reimagining. And part of reimagining is exploring because we're getting into unknown territory. We don't know. So we're figuring it out.
So do you have any thoughts? Anything arise for you around this whole series we're jumping into?
Yeah, I do. I've had such a different shame hasn't been a big part of my life. It was, I think, of course, when I was a teen, when I was younger. But I feel so far away from it at this point. But I did recently have a very deep spiral, and it was like, wow, what an uncomfortable feeling, and so useful for me to really understand how so many people live in shame on such a consistent and regular basis, and to have just more visceral compassion for what they're going through, because it's a bit like depression. It feels like there's no way out. Like there is no way to stop this sensation and this pain in my body. Right. And I think,
which is different than the inner critic.
It is different. Yeah. The inner critic often is like, if you really listen to the voice of the inner critic, it usually has the same tone of voice as your mom or your dad.
Right. And it says
or your primary
things.
Caregiver.
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
Afraid.
It's just a scared little kid. It is.
Yeah. I think
whereas shame, you're right. It kind of feels like you don't have any control over it. Like
it feels like, because that's the difference between guilt and shame, which Alicia spoke to, is like, shame is you thinking you are bad rather than you did something bad. Right. Yeah. Guilt is like, oh, I did something wrong or I did something bad. But shame is like, no, I am bad. So I think there's this place where we have the opportunity to get more in touch with our true essence, so that because this is very Chinese medicine, like bring in the good to push out the bad.
I love that. I think that's really such a brilliant, heartfelt intention.
Yeah.
Way to go, Chinese medicine. Keep doing it. You keep giving us so much good gems.
Yeah.
By the way, I got approval from my surgeon to have you work on my scars.
Oh, okay, good. Yeah. We're
Yeah,
gonna needle Leah's scars.
We're gonna needle my scar.
Cool. Can't wait for that.
I think that's it. Everybody, you know everything.
Yeah.
Well, You know some.
You
You know a
know
little
them.
bit. You
You
know
know a
what you
lot.
know. We love
Yeah.
ya, and we'll catch you next time.
Ciao for now.
Blah, blah, blah.
Thanks for tuning in. This episode was hosted by Tantric Sex Master Coach and Positive Psychology Facilitator Leah Piper, as well as by Chinese and Functional Medicine Doctor and Taoist Sexology Teacher Dr. Willow Brown. Don't forget, your comments, likes, subscribes, and suggestions matter. Let's realize this new world together.